What's up, comic book fans? And welcome to Comics Icons. Now, JJ, what they call me. And today, we got more Blood Hunt. This time with the first issue of a new 3-part miniseries tie-in called Dracula Blood Hunt. And what's dope about this series is that it features one of the rarest team-ups imaginable, with the immortal Lord of the Vampires, Dracula, teaming up with the daughter of his biggest nemesis, Blade. And with the crazy events of the first issue of Blood Hunt, we wondered what was going on with the Dark Lord. And if you guys missed that first Blood Hunt series issue, then I'll place a card at the top of the screen for you right now. And I put a link up at the end of the video. But it was in that last issue where Blade was revealed to be the leader of the structure and the cause of the dark force energy blocking out the sun and causing chaos to reign right now, making this interesting new powerful pairing necessary. So if you guys are ready for this dope new series between Dracula and the daughter of Blade, Brielle Brooks, aka Bloodline, then you guys know what time it is. Let's get it. So this story starts off with the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula, and he's suiting up with his strongest armor and his strongest sword. And it is just before the beginning of sun death. But then he's greeted by one of his spies as she reports to him that the situation is exactly as he'd predicted, and everything is in place for his arrival in Atlanta. However, the unrest has already begun. Rumors of dissent both here and overseas. Vampires who see the changing of the tide. So of course Dracula demands that these potential traitors need to be dealt with immediately, regardless of the root of their discontent. But then the Dark Lord asks his spy about her other mission, about the girl. And the spy reports that Brielle Brooks is alive and unaware she's being watched. Then once the spy confirms that she's seen this with her own eyes and her eyes only, she's stabbed in the back. No time for more loose ends, Dracula says. He will use the spy's blood to fuel his travel. Then we pick up with Brielle, aka Bloodline, the daughter of Blade. And it's still prior to sun death by just a few minutes. But Brielle and her friends had just made it to school. And right now they've got no idea what's on the horizon once sun death occurs. They're more concerned right now with their after-school study plans. And honestly, right now, her friends are just surprised that Brielle is even able to hang after school. They figure she'd be too busy hunting with her pops. But according to Brielle, it's important to have a life outside of hunting vampires with her famous vampire hunter dad. But then as sun death begins, Brielle can feel the change in the atmosphere. And as the sky blackens, her body begins to feel strange. Kind of like she does at night. But something's off. Something's causing this, and she's got to find out what it is. She hasn't felt this off since her powers first kicked in, and right now she could barely control her own strength. She knows that something is coming, so she decides to get her friends back home safely. They're gonna have to ditch class today, and as it keeps getting darker, Brielle just keeps getting stronger, and she ends up tearing the car door right off of its hinges. Looks like someone else will need to drive tomorrow. Then we pick back up with Dracula, and now he's made it to Atlanta and is just past sun death. And when he arrives in Atlanta, he comes out of a mausoleum and he's disgusted by all the so-called traffic in this once quiet place. It's rare now in the modern world that cemeteries and mausoleums are truly silent, he thinks. The modern world brings too much noise. Then he comes across 2 other vampires that are harassing a lady, playing with their food, so to speak. And he approaches them and tells them that he's looking for a girl. But these idiots mock and ridicule Dracula. They've got no idea who they're dealing with. Although during an event like this, you would think that they'd be more accepting that they're ancient vampires walking around. But hey, comics, right? But they quickly find out how impatient Dracula is when he backhands one of their heads smooth off. Then he lets the other one know that the only reason he's still standing is because Dracula has need for him. Then he recruits him and asks for his friends. Brielle, meanwhile, though, has got her hunting gear now and is already getting to work on kicking some vamp ass and saving as many people as she can. Then as she goes to drive a stake through one of the vampires, We see that it's that same vampire that Dracula had just spared. He said you were just a kid, he tells her. And she questions him with her reply. Who is he? But then more of his vampire friends show up, so she goes ahead and ends this vamp's time on this earth and prepares herself for another battle. She's got this. It's exactly what her dad trained her for, she says. But she can't help but wonder, who besides her dad knows who she is, since that vamp was sent to find her? But the rest of the vampires start to engage her though, and she does a great job of holding them at bay. She's new to all this vampire hunting, but she could tell that something feels off. These vampires are ignoring everything else and gunning for her. And one of them even manages to bite her. And right now, there's just way too many of them. And she's not so new at this that she thinks that she could take them all on without an edge. But the dark sky has its advantages for her. Even though she can still feel the pain of that bite, she can also feel her arm healing. So she runs until she can feel her strength coming back. She just needs them to lose sight of her just for a second. So she bends a corner and holds her breath, stays more still than she's ever have before, and then takes the cheapest shot she's ever taken when one runs around the corner to where she was waiting. And at first she thinks that this move gave her a few extra seconds. Maybe she could take out more of these vampires, but she's still eventually going down. But all of a sudden, she notices the momentum changes. And she notices that the vampire numbers are dwindling. In fact, they're dwindling way faster than she's working, which means she's not alone. And then she sees him. And her dad's the best fighter that she's ever seen. Until this moment, she never knew the difference between the best fighter and the most powerful. She's not entirely sure, but she thinks she knows who this is helping her. But she doesn't know why he'd be fighting vampires with her. But she's got no time to freak out about it right now since they're in the middle of this battle. Until all of a sudden, everything is quiet and it's just the two of them standing. Then she speaks to him. I know you, she says. You're him. Dracula. Then Blade told you about me, Dracula rebuts. At least that part of your education isn't lacking, even if your combat remains less than impressive. But he assures her that he's not here to fight her. But just like most of the heroes, she leaps right into battle without knowing any of the details of why he's there. But as she goes in to attack him, he notes that she doesn't have her father's polish nor his experience. But at least she has his stubbornness, although that'll hardly be enough. But he easily dodges all her attacks. Then he holds the tip of his sword right at her neck. You are Brielle Brooks, the daughter of my oldest enemy, the end of his bloodline, he says to her. But she replies that her father would have never told him who she was or where she was. And he agrees. But the very same events that gave bloodline her gifts made finding her child's play for Dracula. But again, he did not seek her for vengeance. He's here because the world is ending. And if Brielle comes with him and they're lucky, they might just save it. So she's like, wait, you want me to go with you to save the world? Then she looks at his acolytes and asks if they're with him, but he assures her that they are the fastest mode of transportation. So now she's like, okay, two things. One, man, if you're lying, then me and my dad are gonna wreck you. And two, she's gonna need to call her mom. So once she calls her mother and lets her know that she's gonna be a little bit late coming home, Dracula's acolytes then transport them from Atlanta to Manhattan. And as more vampires come charging down at this new unlikely alliance, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the issue. What's up, comic book fans? And welcome to Comics Icons. Now, JJ, what they call me. And today, we got more Blood Hunt. This time with Dracula Blood Hunt issue number 2. So this issue kicks off as Brielle continues to run and thinks about everything that had just happened to her, learning that her dad was the big bad. And not only that, but the only other superhero that she personally knows besides her dad is Miles Morales. and he just attacked her on her father's orders. So it's kind of understandable for her to freak out like she has. And as she finally slows down to take a moment to process all of this, she runs into more vampires. And now the fight is on as she cuts through them while still crying about her father. Strong, even through her pain. I like it. But then as she begins to get overwhelmed by these vampires, she gets some help in this fight by none other than Daredevil, who offers to chaperone this dance since the vamps are going after a kid. And as Brielle watches him work, she thinks to herself that seeing the heroes fight on TV is one thing, but to see it in person is a whole other experience. And they each have their own little nuances that make them special. And for Daredevil, watching him move is like watching a ballet. So different from both her dad and Spider-Man. But as impressive as he is, Brielle is still hesitant with him once the fighting stops. All of the heroes have been failing her today, so she assumes that Daredevil is also here to tell her that she needs to kill her dad. But Daredevil has no idea who she or her dad even is. He was just doing what he does, saving people. So as she begins to introduce herself to him, he notices that her heartbeat starts to get very erratic. And then she goes for her serum pills and starts to pass out just as she tells Daredevil that her name is Brielle and her father is Blade. Then a little bit later on, as she wakes back up, we see that Daredevil has taken her to a rooftop and he'd helped her get her serum pills before she passed out. And she tells him that the pills help her maintain control for when she's had too much blood loss or smells way too much blood. But then she finishes telling him that Dracula and Doctor Strange and all the other heroes told her that her pops was the Lord of the Vampires now, and that she'd have to take him out. And she's really surprised that Daredevil doesn't already know about any of this. But what he does know is that the sun's been blocked out and he can smell the dark magic. And then now the city's filled with vampires, but that's about it. And he has her to fill him in on the rest, which she does. But it's just something about all of this that doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense to Brielle. She just got her dad in her life, and the first thing he did was save it. And then after he saved her life, he's the one that trained her how to fight. And now all of a sudden she's supposed to believe that he did all of that just to turn around and hunt her down? Maybe he's got a different plan that they can't see. Or maybe it's a shapeshifter playing games, and instead of investigating, the other heroes expect her to just end him. And out of all of the heroes, Spider-Man was the only one that she had already known, and he tried to kill her. But Daredevil reminds her that Spider-Man was sent by her father, according to him, and that no one should be forced to make this type of a choice so early into being a hero. And he apologizes to her because he understands what she's going through. But sometimes this is what being a hero is all about. Tough choices. Sometimes you come face to face with a villain that you care about. Maybe it's a shapeshifter, or they can't control themselves. But you know what they're doing is evil. And even worse, maybe they really did switch sides, and the only way to stop them is to step up because you love them. And if you don't stop them, then you've decided that you're okay with it. And then he tells her that there's nothing that he could say that would make this easier, but he won't force her into making any choices. He does, though, know that running will never save the day. And if it helps, he also knows what it's like to be on the other side as well, and he's grateful that his loved one stopped him. And as far as he's concerned, it's one of the greatest acts of love that you can offer. But then Daredevil senses that they're not alone. Someone has joined them, and it's not the same dark magic that's blocked out the sun, but it is a vampiric presence that he senses. And before he even looked, Brielle already knew who it was, as Dracula descends down on them, asking if she's finished with her crying because they've got serious work to handle. Man, I know Dracula's historically the bad guy, and I'm not supposed to like him, but he's got some pretty dope, unbothered one-liners. Are you done crying, girl? We got real work. That's gangster. But then he tells Daredevil how easy it was for him to track them both, and that this blood hunt is composed of predators with one singular focus. And you have her up here on a roof? The hell is wrong with you? Step aside. But Daredevil, the ever valiant one, defends Brielle and tells Dracula that she doesn't want to go with him. But Dracula rebuts that the existence of their species doesn't care what she wants. And then Daredevil attacks. But for Dracula, fighting Daredevil is like swatting a fly, and he takes him down pretty easily. But lucky for Daredevil, Dracula doesn't care to waste time killing him. And Brielle has seen enough and steps up and offers to go with Dracula if he backs off. So she ends up leaving with him. And I just thought here that it'd have been so on point for Blood Hunt to have vampires attack and turn Daredevil right now on the roof, right after Dracula and Brielle left while he's sitting there with his ass kicked. But as Brielle and Dracula head back to the sanctum, she wants to stop for a moment to at least check in with her mom once again, because she still hasn't heard back from her. And she just left Atlanta in a hurry and needs to make sure that her mom even checked her voicemail and knows that she's in New York. So she goes off and makes the call, and once again has to leave another voicemail, and tells her that she doesn't know if she wants to be a hero anymore after today with what she has to do. But then her call is forced to have to end early, as all of a sudden Dracula calls out to prepare herself because they're coming. As Brielle then drops her phone, and it almost appears as if she's frozen, as a voice then tells her that she should have listened to the false Lord Dracula's warning. You should have hurried. Otherwise, I think you wanted me to find you. As then we see a giant creature with the face of her father. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the issue. What's up, comic book fans? And welcome to Comics Icons. Now, JJ what they call me. And today, we got more Blood Hunt. This time with Dracula Blood Hunt issue number 3, the finale of this series. So when this issue kicks off, Brielle, of course, is still laid out on the ground unconscious. And as her father Blade, now possessed by Varney, look over her, Dracula, however, knows that Varney is behind this and calls him out and reminds him that in this incorporeal form that Varney is using, he won't be able to harm Brielle. But Varney assures Dracula that harming her is not what he intends. What he plans to do is to turn her against Dracula and have her join his side so they may rule together. And as this Varney form dissipates, Dracula is left to fight a horde of Varney's vampires while Brielle's body lay defenseless. Meanwhile, as Brielle's body lay unconscious, her inner self wakes up, so to speak, or her spiritual self, or whatever you want to call it, wakes up on the other side. And she even thinks to herself that whatever this is, it's the opposite of waking up. But she notices the world around her warping like a rippling pool, and the only steady thing is her. But this world feels like her home in Atlanta. She mentions that the air even smells like Atlanta. And as she's able to make out her school through the ripples, she decides to walk towards it. Or more like she thinks herself there, and then she's there, like a dream world under her command. And she even notices that the towers and battlements of the school tell her that this is hers, although she knows her actual school doesn't have towers and battlements. And I ain't gonna lie to you, how many high school kids know what towers and battlements even are? Shout out to the writers. But as she walks through the school, even the bell rings with the word mine over and over. Nothing in this world makes any sense, she thinks, although she instinctively knows which way to go, to which the school whispers to her that it's because this place is mine. And it's when she opens the door to a particular classroom, she actually starts to believe that this is hers, as she sees her dad, Blade, and a wave of relief begins to wash over her. But when she runs up to give him a hug, he vanishes and then reappears behind her. So she knows that he's not really her dad, and she goes for her sword, and that's when she realizes that she has no weapons in this place. As Blade then tells her that she has no need for weapons in this place, only the violence that he has passed on to her in her blood. And mention of this begins to make Brielle start to change, as she thinks that she could feel her mind go red, and the bloodlust begins to be impossible to resist. And now all that's left is her thirst for blood and her father's approval. Then the shadows in the classroom begin to take shape and form into her friends from back home, as her father tells her that this is her inheritance. She's meant to be a predator and the world her prey. And now with her hunger now fully in control, she no longer sees them as her friends, only food. And then we pick back up with Dracula as he wipes out the vampire horde while Brielle's body still lay immobilized. And we all know that this vampire horde is still no match for Dracula, who mentions it himself. And then he even taunts Varney for this pathetic attack that's accomplished nothing but insult Dracula. But then all the body parts of the horde begin to come together to form one stupid large blood monster, which Dracula finds as a possible worthy adversary finally. And then we pick back up with Brielle in the spirit realm or dream realm or whatever we're calling it, while she lashes out at her friends as she thinks that her body reacts before her mind can even pump the brakes. Meanwhile, Blade tells her that he heard the phone call with her mother at the end of the last issue before she had dropped her phone, and he heard her telling her that she's no hero, which he agrees with, as heroics are not in her bloodline. But as she is finally able to resist the urge to feed on her friends, Blade tells her that these attempts to deny her true power will continue to fail and torment her. But then he tells her that she could save her friends and make them into something greater, and that those she cares about can survive and thrive if they join him. But it could only happen if she stands at his side in their kingdom. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Dracula is still fighting against the blood monster, 3 of them actually, and he acknowledges that they seem to move with a single-mindedness. And the magic holding them together makes fighting them like slicing through a river of blood. But just like the creatures have transformed into this beast, Dracula's anger has transformed him as well, and he's no longer insulted by the lack of adversaries, but now enraged at the continued assault to his domain. And after a fitting battle, Dracula is victorious against these monsters. He knows that the full pretender to his throne is watching, he thinks to himself. But as long as he's able to protect Brielle, then he knows they'll win. Although right now he thinks that the only true hurdle lies with Brielle and whether or not she's as stubborn as her father, just as he also begins to notice her phone ringing right next to her body. Brielle, meanwhile, is now being given a choice by the artist formerly known as Blade, to side with the enemy Dracula and all you know and love dies, or stop playing hero and save your friends by joining my side. But Brielle knows that what he wants wouldn't be saving her friends, as she recalls Daredevil's words, and if she did this to her friends, they'd hate her too much for her to be okay with just letting it happen. She can't just stand around and watch as her friends became evil just because she was too scared to fight. So she rejects his requests and tells him that she loves him too much to just stand beside him. But then he begins to get angry at her rejection, and then changes into a more monstrous form, causing Brielle to freak for a second and feel like she's in over her head. And even her friends now attack her. But she then hears the familiar sound of her phone buzzing through the school bells as the world around her begins to crumble and she begins to run. But she's not running away. She's running towards it as the buzzing stops and is then followed by the voice of Brielle's mom telling her that she doesn't need for Brielle to be an Avenger or like her father. But she does need her to wake up. Whether she needs to stay in New York and fight or run all the way back home, it doesn't matter just as long as she wakes up and chooses. But she trusts whatever decision Brielle decides to make, and she loves her, and she's proud of her. And as the world falls away and her mom asks only to hear the sound of Brielle's voice, Brielle finally awakens. Her refusing to join Varney destroyed the fake world he built for her, but her mother's voice showed her the path out. Her mom's words cut through Dracula's demands and Varney's lies told through her father's mouth. She had worried so much about what she can't do that she'd forgotten what she can do. And now that she's awake, she finally gets to have a talk with her mom. She'd been getting the voicemail since issue 1, and finally, they get to speak. And they of course both tear up as they talk, and her mom basically tells her that she trusts Brielle. And although she's terrified for her, She'll find the strength as long as Brielle does what feels right to her. And as Brielle finishes her call, Dracula reaches out his hand to her, presuming that she's finally made her decision. But Brielle pulls away and gets up on her own. She's not gonna let Dracula boss her around, but she also acknowledges that that's no longer her father, but that was her mother on the phone, which makes this easier. Then she offers to thank Dracula if she thought he'd care about it, but he responds that her family hasn't really been known for their manners. Then she tells him that her family is her responsibility. So let's go save my dad from himself. And as they head into the finale of the Blood Hunt series and event, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the issue and this Dracula Blood Hunt series. So what did you guys think about the issue and the series as a whole? How weird is it seeing Blade as the villain and Dracula as the hero? Something about that just don't feel right. But how do you feel about the Brielle spotlight in this Dracula series? It was his series, but he was pretty much the supporting role in it. I guess because a series named after Brielle or Bloodline wouldn't quite sell just yet. But you guys know I want to hear everything you guys are thinking about how all this went down and how you're liking this Blood Hunt as a whole so far. And as always, if you guys enjoyed this video and this channel and you'd like to support the channel, then you could do so by stopping by the Comics Icons store and picking you up some Comics Icons merchandise, including the background music heard right here in this video available for download. Or by joining the Iconic Fan Club channel membership, and there'll be a link in the description to join. But with your membership, your voice will be heard during our interactive live streams with yours truly, where we could talk about everything that's been going down in these issues, as well as ones that you'd like for me to go over in the future and other comic news. Plus, you guys will get loyalty badges, member shoutouts, and up to 20% off of Comics Icons merchandise from the Comics Icons store. Plus, we've got tiers to the memberships as well, beginning at just 99 cents. Or you guys can donate to the channel with a super thanks. And if you're not able to do either of those, then you can still be a tremendous help to the future of this channel by dropping a like, share, and subscribing to Comics Icons for more icons in the comic book world. But ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time. I'm out. Peace.